Hi, I just wanted to give an introduction, a little bit of background on the Me and White Supremacy learning groups for white folks through Apocalypsis. My name is Ronan, and I'm the facilitator and the executive director of Apocalypsis. So yeah, I just wanted to give a little background on how these came to be. And basically why we continue to do them and how they've kind of evolved over the years. I was first invited to co-facilitate one of these. So Me and White Supremacy is a book written by Layla Saad, a Black Muslim, I believe, British woman who wrote this book for white-bodied and white-presenting folks to understand how we impact folks of color, most specifically Black people in America and in England. Although it does leak into just kind of like internalized racism, generally speaking. So I was invited to co-facilitate back in 2019 at a small nonprofit in the town that I live in. And basically it came out of the social justice movement where white folks were coming in, causing harm, like within good intentions, coming into social justice, anti-racism realms, like as volunteers or employees or donors, whatever, all the different capacities as like leaders, really, all as well, like all in any place you can think of. And with basically coming in with unexamined whiteness, with good intentions, causing harm, oftentimes pushing out folks of color out of the movement because the cost on their well-being was just too much. So we started doing those. We did them for 10 weeks. Once a week, we met once a week for 10 weeks. I believe we met for 2.5 hours, I think. And at the time it was a PDF. It wasn't even published into a book yet. And then I think by the second group we facilitated, this book came out. And this is still the book that we use today. Because now there are other versions, I think like a workbook, but this already has like kind of like a workbook built into it. So when we first started them, we fully followed the directions of Layla because it's intended for white folks to host Me and White Supremacy book groups. That's her intention. And there's like a section in the back where she talks about how to do it. And so we followed exactly what she said to do for maybe the first two groups. And then, by the way, I think the second group we facilitated, that's when COVID hit and there was some kind of implosion at the nonprofit as well. And so our program was cut. And then my friend and I, we just kept doing them on our own out in the world because they seemed so, we saw them as being really life-changing in a mostly good way. And I say mostly because when we followed exactly what Layla said, what we kind of ended up seeing was a lot of white folks who were kind of broken apart, which is really good, like to really look at ourselves and be like, oh, holy crap, and think about all the ways that we've negatively we white-bodied people have impacted folks of color in our lives, to really look at all these different topics like white exceptionalism, like I'm a good white person, or white superior or white superiority, which is this programming that because I'm white, I'm just a little bit better than folks of color. So kind of those internal program pieces that we've tended to kind of push away and not want to look at. And what do you end up getting in a book or in a process where all you're doing is just looking at those pieces? You end up with people that aren't really able to function. The people who really take it to heart and really do that work, it can result in just an absolute kind of freeze, collapse response, or defensiveness and not even finish the group, just leave. So basically we found it was not acknowledging that it didn't do the part of putting people back together, so to speak. And then the other part is it's not really trauma informed. So what happens when you do this work of looking at that internal stuff is you end up discovering it's attached to other things as in like some maybe trauma that you had as a child where you felt like you weren't allowed to speak up, or maybe the maternal line of powerlessness and being controlled by male-bodied people. You just any trauma you have in you, we develop these survival mechanisms, to be in certain ways to keep ourselves safe. And when you go through this work and don't pay attention to that, it can really leave people hanging, like just it's too much. It's not actually getting people to where they want to be functional in the community and doing the social justice work, or just causing less harm in the workplace, or being more aware of unconscious racist biases. So how they evolved is now the partner that I was working with at the time, we started building this collection of tools, and she's gone on to other things, but I've continued to add tools to that. And so now it's doing the book, the Layla Saad's Me, White Supremacy book, but added with it are somatic tools, like paying attention to our body, working on healing, looking at how things came to be, feeling into paradox, other resources that look at like gender, for example, in a more nuanced way. And so, and then also we've had people that have taken it more than once and found that to be really useful, because to come together in this group and to be witnessed and to witness others, to hold that space, to have a place where emotions can be worked through, folks can cry and not worry about redirecting attention within like a space that has folks of color. So it's basically a safer space. I mean, for us, but really it's a safer space for for folks of color by not being there, if you know what I mean. It's kind of ironic, actually. And the other thing I just want to mention too is that there's a lot of really big things going on in the world, like as far as people are dying. And so this thing of like, well, how to be cause less harm at work might seem small or like not something to prioritize. But the reason that I continue to do these and why I think it's so important, and every now and then I'm like, oh, should I just be out on in the streets or whatever? Well, I can still be out in the streets too if I want to. But the reason this work is so, so, so important is because I have come to understand that for people of color, they also have these really huge life or death things. They're paying attention to all the things we are, and have the reality of living in a racist, the winners of racism country, living in that, and then having to be around white folks in a community like this one where there's so many white people, and then having to just experience that cellular wear and tear and emotional stress and harm in the everyday situations, like at work, in uh places where they volunteer or want to volunteer, or with family members who are white, friends who are white, all the places, the grocery store, wherever. And so I continue to encourage white folks to participate in one of these groups. I really don't, I don't really like to honestly work with white folks who haven't been through this, because it's such a fantastic base layer of what's it called when we have like going through the list, like an inventory, sort of like an internal inventory of how unconscious internalized racism shows up in each of us in a supportive space. So it's also building community, and it's hard work, it's tough work. And so to be in a held, compassionate space is really important, where we're also holding ourselves accountable. That's kind of how we got to roll, So then the 10 weeks, it started out as 10 weeks for 2.5 hours. I shrunk it down to 9 weeks for an hour and a half. And now this starting just this fall, I'm doing fall 2024, I'm doing these 5-week sessions. So it's more condensed, it's faster, and I'm hoping to get more white folks to do it. So yeah, so that is what I wanted to share and why I think it's really important. If you haven't seen the book before, some of the other topics are racist stereotypes, white apathy, white centering, tokenism, white saviorism, how to speak up to like white leaders, white friends, your family, tone policing. And it starts off with terms that a lot of folks at this point, a lot of white folks have heard of, like white privilege, white fragility. And so I think that there are some white folks that can be like, oh, I've already done enough. You know, I've read books, I've watched people talk. But what's so unique about this book is that it's all about you. It's not about the out there, it's about the you, and the way she writes the questions, and based on her experiences, knows what it feels like in a really unique way. It's just this collection of really, really helpful self-accountability, kind of journaling questions. And then I add other questions too, to kind of help update it a little bit with some other stuff, since some of these terms we have become pretty familiar with. So that is my pitch. And I really, really hope that every white person goes through one of these. I just think it's really important. And I've been leading these now since 2019. Sometimes I've done 3 groups in one season. I'm still not tired of it. I never get tired of it. And as some of you have heard me say, I have now come to understand that my whiteness is a condition and that it's something that needs to be managed and all the time. It just needs, so to go through this self-reflection process and with other white folks who bring other like ahas to the group, you know, maybe something you hadn't thought of, or you're like, I don't have that. And then somebody brings something in and goes, actually, you know what, in this context, I do have that. And then you go, oh my God, I do too. So also just having other people noodling on it and then sharing that is really helpful. Okay, thank you so much for listening. I'm going to put all the registration information in the content of this. Okay, be well. Bye.